In 2019, I asked myself a question that felt small at the time, but changed the course of my life. What are my skills, my talents, and my passions? I knew I was passionate about diabetes, and I knew I loved working with kids. I also felt confident in managing blood sugar. At the time, I needed under the table income, so I typed a phrase into Google: babysitting families with type 1 diabetes. That search led me to Safe Sittings, a babysitting network for the type 1 diabetes community created by Beyond Type 1. Through that platform, I found a job posting for a part-time nanny position with a 6-year-old boy living with type 1 diabetes and his older sister. I met their mom for coffee, and what neither one of us knew then was that 6 months later, we'd be navigating a global pandemic together, and that the next 3 years would transform my understanding of mentorship, diabetes care, and community support forever. Hi, I'm Sabella Larkin, a patient advocate, writer, storyteller, and your host for this storytelling series. This series is grounded in a belief that stories aren't just anecdotes, they're synapses. They connect what we know in science and technology with what we feel in real life: the complexity of care, the power of community, the data of lived experience. As Brene Brown states, maybe stories are just data with a soul. Through each story, we explore how lived experience becomes a bridge, a way to illuminate what's missing in healthcare, and an opportunity to restore connection. This is about more than just sharing. It's about healing, vision, and change. Let's dive in. During the pandemic and the years following, I've worked closely with multiple families in San Diego. Because of school closures during the pandemic, I had the privilege and opportunity of spending nearly all day with a few local families in their homes. First, there was Remy. That's whose mom I met through Safe Sittings. He was my first diabestie. If you're unfamiliar with that term, it's diabetes and best friend combined, diabestie. Remy was diagnosed at 18 months, but we met when he was 6 years old, just before the pandemic. And then there was Quinn. We met at the beginning of the pandemic. She was 5 years old and diagnosed just 3 weeks prior to us meeting. And then there was Hudson and his older brother, Jack. Hudson was also 5 when we met, with a love for Star Wars and a wicked imagination. Academic learning was virtual and lasted about 2 to 3 hours in the day. Having the opportunity to be side by side with the children during their academic learning time allowed me to seamlessly integrate academic learning with diabetes knowledge and skills through life experiences, basically taking conceptual knowledge and putting it into action. It wasn't just about managing blood sugar for these children. Yes, of course, I did that. But because of the circumstances of the pandemic and virtual school, I had nearly all day with these children to integrate diabetes into life and life into diabetes. We changed pumps together. We did finger pricks together. We put low snacks in our pockets before heading out to play. And with Remy, we had pool days, beach days, snow days, zoo days. We went on hikes, went to museums, we went fishing, rock climbing, we played hockey, and every sport under the sun. Needless to say, this was the best job I ever had. Through these moments, children weren't just being cared for, they were learning, and not from a parent or doctor, but they were learning about diabetes from someone who lives it too. Learning in camaraderie like this feels a lot less like learning and more like shared experience between teammates. I narrated every diabetes thought, decision, and action pertaining to our blood sugars, not just Remy's or Hudson's, but mine too. Over time and incrementally, I included them in this process in a very intentional, skilled, safe, and playful way that provided them with choice, and a voice in their diabetes management. Last fall, I had the opportunity to attend the Diabetes Mind Innovation Days Summit in San Diego, California, as a patient advocate. Speaker and Type 1 himself, Adam Brown, stated, like juggling, diabetes is a progression of skills learned experientially. It is impossible to learn everything at once. Conceptual knowledge is just not enough. Adam so wonderfully demonstrated this through a juggling demo with Howard Look, founder and former CEO of Tidepool. Through comedy and juggling performance, a spectacular juggling performance, I might add, Adam and Howard also conveyed the importance of a coaching style that highlights bright spots rather than landmines for mental health and well-being in diabetes tech, the progression of diabetes skills learned experientially, and also in learning how to juggle. Diabetes is not just a medical condition. Living with diabetes is a portfolio of part-time jobs. Adam Brown. I want to share the voice of a parent who's been a meaningful part of this journey, Amanda Kellogg, Lucas's mom. Lucas is another one of my diabesties, living with both type 1 diabetes and autism. I've had the honor of mentoring and supporting Lucas and his family over the past few years, and the relationship we've built is one of deep trust, care, and learning on both sides. Amanda's words reflect a parent's perspective on what this mentorship has meant for their family and how support like this can make a real difference in navigating the complexities of raising a child with type 1 diabetes. Here's Amanda.
In the time following diagnosis, James and I never imagined being able to step away from diabetes ever. And you were able to provide that for us in a way that I never have to doubt for a moment that he is taken care of and he is safe and he is understood. And on top of that, you have a way of being able to relate to him in regards to diabetes in a way that I simply can't do.
This role, caregiver, mentor, teacher, diabetes life coach for kids and families, it doesn't officially exist in the healthcare model, and yet it's everything. One of my favorite diabetes skills to coach is interoception. Interoception is the ability to sense and understand internal bodily signals, giving us insight into our physiological, mental, and emotional states. Like the time Remy asked me, Bella, why do I feel like my blood sugar is low, but Dexcom shows that my blood sugar is 200? In this case, his blood sugar was 200 milligrams per deciliter, or 11.1 mmOLs, double arrows down. First, I celebrated his curiosity, of course, and then I shared with him that sometimes I'm able to feel the number value of my blood sugar. Sometimes I'm feeling the direction of the arrow, whether it's up, down, even diagonal. And sometimes I'm able to also feel how quickly my blood sugar is changing. Not all the time, though. And then I asked him, what do you think you're feeling right now? To which he replied, double arrows down, and ran inside to grab a Capri Sun. Sensing blood sugar fluctuations is such a complex dynamic, especially in childhood. Oftentimes, young children and parents of young children report that the child doesn't feel the highs or lows yet, or that they aren't able to communicate when they feel the sensations of lows or high blood sugars. I often wonder if many children feel the sensations much earlier, but have difficulty identifying, interpreting, and communicating these internal sensations. Helping kids recognize and interpret the sensations they feel during blood sugar fluctuations is not only life-saving for us as people living with type 1 diabetes, but it's also an essential skill to develop and refine in order to live well with diabetes, especially from a whole person care perspective. This isn't your average school curriculum. nor is it taught through sticker charts or milestone timelines for diabetes independence. It's about helping a child understand their own experience, what a high and low blood sugar feels like for them, how to manage the mental and emotional components of the experience, how to advocate for themselves and their needs, how to express, communicate, how to tune in to present moment awareness and evaluate when to rest, when to ask for help, when it's safe to keep going, and to develop the confidence in their resilience and their ability to manage blood sugar and diabetes for the rest of their lives. 7-year-old Remy said to me one time, "I think I'll live with my parents forever and probably not go to college." I said, "Oh, okay. What makes you feel that way?" He replied, "Diabetes seems really hard, and I don't think I can do that, Bella." I smiled to myself and said, "Totally valid, dude. Diabetes management is hard, and you might feel differently in the future." Fast forward 2 years later, this is why I smiled. And Remy was complaining about how he felt like his parents didn't trust him to do diabetes when he went over to the neighbor's house. I reminded him of our conversation 2 years prior and asked him if he felt differently now, to which he side-eyed me with a smile this time and said, "Yes, Bella." And then we talked about his parents' concern for his well-being, not being a distrust in him, but also validating that it absolutely feels that way for Remy, and further coming up with ideas on how to facilitate communication, understanding, and nurture that trust bond in diabetes management between him and his parents. He was 9 years old at the time. This is the lived experience foreshadowing into teen years that informs and inspires the research and recommendations presented at scientific conferences. I cannot emphasize it enough. Diabetes is a condition that affects every dimension of the human experience for everyone involved, not just at the time of diagnosis, but throughout all of life, and care needs to reflect this. Prior to the pandemic and post-pandemic, the texts from parents still come in. "Can you swing by the school to change a pump site? Are you available to manage her blood sugar on site this week while the aide is on vacation? His pump fell off and no one noticed." And don't even get me started about the strategy that parents have to implement for insulin dosing to compensate for the lack of diabetes knowledge and experience or healthcare qualified staff in schools. I filled the gaps where healthcare, funding, and school systems have failed to connect. I've kept kids safe and healthy, not through policy, but through presence. I've helped to educate school staff and peers. And nope, I'm not a certified diabetes educator, nor a healthcare professional like I always thought I would be. I don't have a master's degree or an expensive acronym after my name to portray my knowledge, skills, talents, and dedication to my passion. But I can implement the American Diabetes Association's Safe at School principles in real life. And to me, the kids and these families, that's invaluable. Another pivotal moment was working alongside Raquel Barron, founder of Type 1 Together. Together, we revived the Type 1 diabetes babysitting list and created a coaching series to train grandparents on diabetes management. But more than that, we acknowledged the mental and emotional labor diabetes demands from everyone involved. We made space for grief, guilt, resilience, joy, and shared learning. Because the truth is, when a child is diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, it often feels like the village disappears. Our work together at the time, and Type 1 Together's continued work, has been about rebuilding that village for the diabetes community, bridge by bridge by bridge. For the longest time, I thought I'd end up becoming a healthcare professional, a peds endo, or a nurse. And one day, while driving to hockey practice, Remy asked me, "Why do you want to be a nurse so badly, Bella?" I said, "Because I want to help kids and families live with diabetes." Without hesitation, he replied, "You're already doing that." That moment, of course, is imprinted into my heart and mind forever. But when I looked up in the rearview mirror, his eyes were glued to his phone, and he had no idea how much that meant to me. But I'll never forget it. It's been 6 years since Remy and I first met. His sister was in seventh grade, and now I'm attending her high school graduation. Mentoring and coaching families living with type 1 diabetes has been the best job I've ever had. But the job was only made possible by extenuating circumstances of the pandemic. A learning environment that provided flexibility and space for diabetes integration, a combination of unemployment benefits, stipends, and Medicaid health insurance for me. Families who could afford this type of care and who also understood that the value didn't come from a specific university degree, but rather was born from my lived experience and asking myself those three questions. What are my passions, my talents, and my skills? This job, it doesn't exist. Not officially. Not yet. At least not in the way that we've been asking kids for decades. What do you want to be when you grow up? And maybe we should stop asking kids that question altogether and instead guide and empower them in helping them to discover their talents, their skills, and their passions with freedom and acceptance to let those answers evolve and change over time. And maybe we should create more flexibility and fluidity in these spaces for them, between systems and stories, medicine and mindfulness, innovation and integrity. So here's my call. Listen to our lived experience and build bridges. This isn't a summer camp. It isn't a single webinar or a doctor's visit. It's an evolving, flexible, integrative support model that mirrors the daily, lifelong reality of diabetes. To healthcare providers and the National Board of Health and Wellness Coaches, collaborate with advocates and coaches. Help integrate mentorship and coaching into clinical care. To researchers and universities, continue to fund clinical trials that explore the power of peer mentorship and experiential learning. To parents and families, know that you're not alone and that this kind of support can and should be accessible. To Type 1 Together and the community, thank you for your partnership and collaboration to create solutions where there are gaps. To funders and innovators, let's co-create a future where this kind of support isn't a privilege, it's a standard. We are not just people affected by diabetes. It is our lived experience that reveals where care is missing. And it's through collaboration and community that we can transform that experience into synaptic bridges, reforming healthcare and restoring connection. Sometimes the most powerful data isn't found in charts or labs. It's in our everyday moments. It's in our stories. Thank you for listening and for being part of the bridge. With heartfelt thanks to the American Diabetes Association for the opportunity to share this series as part of the 2025 Scientific Sessions. If this resonated with you, let's keep the conversation going, whether it's at ADA, in your clinic, or in your community. Visit sabellalarkin.com/storytelling to connect further, explore the blog, and join future projects.